wave 3325 kHz and 4755 kHz, and via streaming on voanews.id and RRI Digital on mobile application. We present various programs for you: Diplomatic Forum, The Session, Indonesian Wonder, Miscellany, Let's Speak Bahasa Indonesia, Indonesian pop and regional songs, international musical entertainment, as well as news and information about Indonesia and abroad. Voice of Indonesia, from Indonesia to the world.
Welcome to VOI Talk in collaboration with the Overseas Indonesian Students Association Alliance for the America-Europe region. Today we talk about Indonesia's forests, which are not only important for environmental conservation, but also provide livelihoods for communities and support agricultural activities. However, competing interests over forests and agricultural land can often lead to agrarian conflicts. To explore how agroforestry could offer a more balanced approach, we are joined by Nugraha Akbar Nurrochmat, an Indonesian student at the Warsaw University of Life Sciences in Poland. Good afternoon from Jakarta. Thank you for joining us, Nugraha. Okay. So, to get us started, what exactly is agroforestry and why do people find it very attractive?
Agroforestry attractive is that we do not always have to choose between forests and agriculture. We can combine both objectives. From an environmental perspective, trees help maintain forest cover, store carbon, protect soil, regulate water, and provide habitat for biodiversity. From an economic perspective, farmers can generate income from several communities with different harvesting periods. So, agroforestry can become a bridge between conservations and productions. For communities living around forests, this is particularly important because we cannot expect people to protect forests if maintaining trees does not also contribute to their livelihoods.
Okay, so that was agroforestry. What do you mean when you talk about multi-purpose forestry, and how does it differ from conventional forestry?
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions. Actually, multi-purpose forestry is quite new in Indonesia, or we call it multi-usaha kehutanan. Traditionally, forestry has been strongly associated with timber productions. We plant trees, manage them for many years, harvest the timber, and then start another rotations. Multi-purpose forestry takes a broader perspective. It asks, why should a forest produce only timber when it can provide many different products and services at the same time? In addition to timber, forests can generate non-timber forest products such as honey, fruits, resin, rattan, medicinal plants, coffee, and other agroforestry communities. Forests can also generate value from environmental services, including carbon sequestrations, ecotourism, water services, biodiversity conservations, and potentially other nature-based businesses. So, instead of calculating the value of 1 hectare of forest only from cubic meters of timber, we calculate the total economic, social, and environmental value that the forest can provide. This diversification is important because it can make forest management economically more attractive and more resilient in long term.
Why do conflicts between the forestry and agricultural sectors still frequently occur in Indonesia?
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting questions, and this is our homework. So one reason is that Indonesia face significant competitions for land. As we know, Indonesia is very huge, very large, but two-thirds of Indonesia area is water. It's ocean. Only one-third of Indonesia is land. And Indonesia land is only around 190 million hectares, while around 120 million hectares or 60% is allocated for forest area. Okay. At the same time, we need land for food productions, plantations, settlements, infrastructure, mining, and other economic activities. And of course, we also need to maintain forests for biodiversity, water, carbon storage, and other ecological functions. So, different sectors are often competing for the same limited land resources. The problem become more complicated because administrative boundaries, actual land cover, permits, historical claims, and community land use don't always match. An area, for example, may legally be classified as forest area, but physically it may have been used for agriculture for many years. Therefore, agrarian conflicts is not simply a conflict between forestry and agriculture. It is also a problem of land allocations, economic interests, historical claims, spatial planning, and governance.
Okay, so before you mentioned that Indonesia is very wide in its ocean, but not so in its land, why have many communities living around forest areas shifted towards agriculture and also plantations?
Yeah, actually, it's a very bad conditions, but it's an inevitable. So first thing we need to understand this from the economic perspective of local communities. Historically, Indonesia forestry was strongly oriented timber, but timber requires a relatively long production cycle, and today the direct contributions of forestry in Indonesia national GDP is relatively small, only less than 1%. So we have 60% of land for forest area, but for Indonesian GDP only less than 1%. At the same time, many communities living around forests still receiving limited economic benefits from forest resources. For a household that needs income every week, every month, waiting many years for timber is obviously difficult. Agriculture and plantations, on the other hand, can provide more regular and predictable cash flow. This creates a strong economic incentive for communities to cultivate agricultural communities or plantations crops. So simply telling peoples, do not convert the forest, it's not enough. If we want communities to maintain trees and forest functions, we also need to answer another questions. What economic alternative can we offer for them? That is why agroforestry and multipurpose forestry are important. Forest conservations need to become economically attractive for the people who actually live around and depend on this landscape.
How extensive exactly are forest areas in Indonesia that are no longer physically covered by forests?
Yeah, so it's very interesting questions. Uh, Even though we allocate 120 million hectares of Indonesian land for forest area, but according to national statistic data, approximately 29 million hectares of forest area are physically are no longer covered with trees, with forests. These areas may include agricultural land, plantations, settlement, shrubs, degraded land, or other land uses. Several million hectares are also associated with oil palm cultivations, kelapa sawit. This is very important distinctions because an area can legally remain a forest area even though physically it has not been forested for many years. Therefore, when we discuss agrarian conflicts, we cannot look only at the administrative map. We also need to understand what is actually happening on the ground.
You mentioned palm oil before. Can agroforestry really compete economically with palm oil, especially for communities living around forest areas?
Yeah. I believe it can. particularly if we develop agroforestry using high value communities and treat it as serious business model. Oil palm is economically attractive because it can provide relatively high regular income. As a simple illustrations, 1 hectare of smallholder oil palm may generate 3 million rupiah per hectare per month. Although this varies considerably based on productivity, input costs, and other. But high value agroforestry can also generate very attractive returns. For example, if we agroforestry durian, avocado, coffee, and other high commodities, we can potentially generate higher income from the fruit and so on. Maybe we can reach until 10 times uh, compared to palm oil. Another important advantage is income diversifications. In monoculture systems like palm oil, farmers depend heavily on one commodity only. If the price falls or production fails, household income can be significantly affected. In agroforestry, farmers may receive income from coffee at one time, fruits at another time, non-timber products at another time, environmental service in the futures and so on. So, uh, however, we should not oversimplify this. Agroforestry will not automatically be more profitable everywhere. It requires good planting materials, appropriate species selections, technical assistance, financial processing, infrastructure, and access to market. So we should not promote agroforestry simply as a tree planting program. We need to develop it as a competitive and sustainable business model.
Okay, Nugraha. Next is how can multi-purpose forestry and agroforestry be implemented in practice to balance forest conservation, agriculture, and also with local communities?
Yeah. So first, we need to recognize that not every forest area should be treated in exactly the same way. Areas with intact natural forests, high biodiversity, critical watersheds, or high conservation value should remain strongly protected. Okay, but areas that already degraded or have been cultivated for many years may require different approach. In these areas, agroforestry can become part of transitions and restoration strategy. Instead of removing all existing economic activities immediately, we can gradually increase recover while maintaining income for local communities. For example, farmers can integrate durian, avocado, coffee, cocoa, timber, species, and other locally appropriate trees in existing agricultural system. Yeah, like palm oil. Usually the planting is 10 meter multiplied with 10 meter, right? So we can do agroforestry in the middle of it. We can plant some trees in the middle of the palm oil. Uh, we need a complete ecosystem involving government, communities, universities, the private sector, financial institutions, and markets. Government can provide legal certainty and appropriate regulations. Universities and research institutions can provide science, technology, and suitable agroforestry models. The private sector can provide investment, processing, and market access. Financial institutions can provide long-term financings, and local communities must be central actors in managing the land. The key principle is that conservation must create economic value for the people who are expected to maintain it. That is how agroforestry and multipurpose forestry can become practical solutions rather than simply theoretical concepts.
And in your opinion, does that mean that palm oil plantations inside of forest areas should simply be or be not removed?
Yeah, actually, it's a very hard question, but for me, it's not necessarily. I think we need a realistic and site-specific approach. If oil palm is located in an ecological criteria area, for example, an area with high conservation value, restorations might indeed require the gradual removal of oil palm and recovery of the natural ecosystem. But not every situation is the same. In some degraded forest area, oil palm or other agricultural activities might already have supported community livelihoods for many years. If we simply remove them without providing an economic alternative, we might solve one environmental problems but create a serious social problems. So one possible approach is gradual transformations. Instead of immediately removing all productive activities, we can progressively transform monoculture systems into more diversified agroforestry system by introducing economically valuable tree species. During these transitions, communities can continue generating income while tree cover and ecological functions are gradually restored. Therefore, the objective should not simply be remove oil palm from forest areas, but bigger question should be how can we restore forest functions while ensuring that communities have viable, sustainable livelihoods. That is the win-win solutions we should looking for.
Okay, Nugraha. So this is our final question before we head on to those in the live stream. To resolve agrarian conflicts, Indonesia has introduced one map and one data policies. How important are these policies and what needs to be done to ensure that they can help create fairer and more sustainable solutions?
Yeah, this is very interesting questions. I think one map and one data policy are fundamental because many agrarian conflicts actually begin with difference in data. An example in Europe, like in Poland, we have one data, one map. So different institutions, different ministry have minimal conflicts. But in Indonesia, we still have data for our own institutions. I think one map and one data. One is one institutions may have a forest area map, another might have agriculture or plantations data. Local government might have their own spatial informations. Companies have concessions maps, while communities might have historical claims and evidence of long-term land occupations. When we overlay all these datasets, sometimes the same piece of land appears and under several different claims or classifications. There is a sengketa, conflicts. So before we can solve the conflict, we first need to agree on what the actual situation is. That is why one map and one data are so important. They can provide common reference for government institutions, business, researchers, and communities. However, integrating data is not only technically challenged, it is also institutionally and governance challenged. This is why I think we need to consider something similar to data amnesty. So what is data amnesty? I mean creating a mechanism that encourages institutions and stakeholders to disclose, correct, and update inaccurate or inconsistent historical data without automatically being punished simply for acknowledging the previous data that were wrong. If institutions are afraid to correct their data because acknowledging an error might create legal or administrative consequence, temuan finding, then inaccurate data may simply continue to be inherited from one period to another. Of course, data amnesty should not mean eliminating responsibility for corruptions, deliberate manipulations, or actual legal violations. The purpose is to create a safe and transparent mechanism for correcting genuine data inconsistency. At some point, we need to be able to pull all the maps and data sets on the table, identify the differences, correct them together, establish a credible common baseline. Ultimately, resolving agrarian conflicts require at least three things: reliable data, legal certainty, and viable economic alternative for local communities. One map and one data can provide information foundations. Better land governance can provide legal certainty, and agroforestry and multipurpose forestry can provide economic alternative. So if these three elements can work together, we can gradually shift the discussions from competitions over land toward collaborations in managing land.
Okay, thank you, Nugraha. So here we have two questions from our live stream comment. Would you like the questions one at a time or all at once?
I think one at a time.
Okay, so first one is from Diaz_Dinanti. How can agroforestry support the Asta Cita's vision of President Prabowo Subianto, particularly in strengthening food security, improving community welfare, and preserving forests?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah. So, food security is very important because, as our first president said, that food is the life and death of the Indonesian country, right? So it's very important. Yeah. And we also know that 60% of Indonesian area is allocated for forest area, or around 120 millions. But our populations is increasing every year, and we need more food. So we need more crops and plantations. So what's the solutions from agroforestry? Uh, so for forest area that still covered with natural forest, keep it like that. Okay, protect it. But the 29 million hectares that forests that are already degraded, that basically not covered with trees anymore, maybe now it's covered only with shrubs or with settlements and so on. We can, or with horticultural crops, we can convert it into agriculture. We can plant uh, durian, avocado, coffee, or other trees that can provide fruits, that can provide food, so it can support Astachita for the food security. I think that's the answer.
Okay, and for our
Yeah.
second question from Golden Wolfers 3301, how is the application of agroforestry in Poland that Indonesia can learn from?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. So in Poland, actually, the forest area is not as much as in Indonesia, but the conditions is quite similar. Like 80% of forest is state forest. Uh, they plant some trees with some shrubs like berries, for wild berries, forest berries. They plant it, and they also like mushroom. So in Poland they have culture. So every year in some season they go to the forest and they pick some mushroom. So because the children, the parents and so on, they go there for holiday. Yeah, and it's become culture, and I think because it's become culture, so they really protect the mushroom, and mushroom need shadows from the trees, so that's why they try to protect the trees, because they know that if there is no trees, they will not have the mushroom, the agroforestry products. So maybe we can try to have similar things like that. Like we don't need to make it as our culture, but maybe we can make like uh, tourism program, like educational tourisms, going to forest. And in Indonesia, maybe we pick some coffee or honey to the forest, and we teach the children that it's important to protect the trees, because there are honey, there are bees, there are coffee and other plants that live under the trees. So we can encourage people to protect the forest with agroforestry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Nugraha, for sharing your insights on how multipurpose forestry and agroforestry can help address agrarian conflicts while also balancing the interests of forests, agriculture, and local communities. Viewers, thank you for tuning in. Also, for those who gave questions on our live stream comment section, we hope that today's discussion has given our listeners a better understanding of the challenges surrounding forests and also agricultural lands, as well as the possible solutions. I'm Kyra, this is Voice of Indonesia, bringing you the best from Indonesia to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.